Hello, and welcome to another training session of Roller Coaster Tycoon 3, brought to you by the Letter Tape. Now, this tutorial, originally I wanted to cover transport rides in general, which is what you see here, but I discovered that it was going to take quite a bit of time, so I'm probably going to be splitting this up. Transport rides are within rides, transport rides, this little trolley looking thing, and here are examples of transport rides. If you just have the base Roller Coaster Tycoon 3, you're just going to have chairlift, elevator, mini railway, all the stuff that doesn't have a little critter on the side. These tigers and shark here, these are things that you get in the expansion packs. This being soaked, this being wild. So if you do not have those expansion packs, which means you either didn't buy the gold edition or the platinum edition or the base edition and an expansion pack, you don't have those rides. But getting to it, we're going to focus on airboat here. What I'm showing will actually apply to airboat as well as water-based transport and paddle steamer. They all function the same way, which is a little different than other coasters. So let's start up the video here, and you'll see some different examples of airboats. In this case, there's a couple piled up here. This that you're looking at here is airboat 1, and all the way over here is the other end of airboat 1. This is one ride. You see you've got an entrance here and an exit here. I go all the way over. You actually have an entrance here and an exit here. So that's one way you can do this ride. Is again, it's a transport ride from getting people from one area to another. In this case, it's a round trip kind of thing. Well, not round trip, but what it does is it allows one ride to facilitate getting people from one area to another and then from that area back. But it's not a round trip ride in that you don't go from there to there. At least that's not what it's designed for. If you were to just do one little station, what you would end up with is something like this. It would just go in a little circle here, because that's all I have is one station with an entrance and exit. So if anybody actually wanted to ride that boring ride, that's what it would do. Now another example I have here is, here we have airboat number 2, and over on this end is the other end of airboat number 2. But if you notice, here's an entrance with people queued up to get into it. Here's an exit. So this would be a very simple example of an airboat ride in that you are literally just transferring from one area to another. Maybe you've got some really large park that you're making where a narrow strip of water, and that's just to get them from one point to another. So these are just different examples, these 3 right here, of ways to use this. Let me show you how it is done. I'm going to go ahead and just pause the part. Alright, so let me show you basically how this is done. What you're going to do is you're going to go to rides, transport rides, airboat, and again this is the same for the airboat, this boat ride up here, or the big paddle boat. You've got your station piece you're going to place, and Z rotates it as it does any piece. So there's one station piece, and if I click again, there's another station piece. Just a side item of note, for any ride that requires a station, you may notice you get a message when you try to start the ride that station's not long enough, or at least one's not long enough, which is what we have here. At least one station's not long enough. What you can do is you can use that as a gauge to check to see how long you need. So for this ride you need a minimum of 2 units for a station. The advantage of adding more stations or station segments to a station, in case you don't already know, is that it gives you the ability to add more cars. In this case I only have enough room for 1 car, or as it just happens to be, 1 boat. But if I go back to construction mode and I add a couple more station segments in here, now when I go back to vehicles, I have enough room for 2. If I kept making it longer, I could have more and more. So just if you didn't know that, that's how you can increase the number of cars that you can have in a section. In this case, I really only need 2. Now, if you notice, there's no options here for left, right, up, down. You've got autocomplete, which doesn't work for this kind of ride anyway, delete, or build a station. So you're like, well, what do I do now? Well, if you try to just complete the ride the way it is here, even if you built a long segment, you're going to end up with one of these little rotatey dealies. It isn't going to work for you. What you need to do is use this icon right here, start a new segment of track, new position. Click on that. Now you've freed from that area, and then you place another station. So now what'll happen is if I start this up, and I've got 2, if you notice I got 2 cars, so this one will go to here, the car that was here will go to here. So in the case of this kind of thing where I've got an entrance and an exit, you could do that. You could have 2 so that they're constantly rotating and the line doesn't get too long. Or you could even do it for this kind where it's just transporting to an area. Basically the more stations you have, the longer the stations, the more vehicles you have. Something else of interest here related to these stations is really for the purposes of this ride, I think it's probably meant to have 2. If I select this area, and you want to make sure it's this area, I'll explain that, and start a new position, I can now put another one out in this area, and I'm going to increase the number of cars to 2 for the point of this example. And now if I demo this, you'll notice this boat goes over to here, this one goes to here. If this was to go through, it would go to this area. If I speed this up real quick, you'll see that that goes there. So there we go. And again, even though the ride is paused, as long as the park is paused, as long as the ride itself is not completed, you can go ahead and use this yellow to test out the track. Let's see, so just another point of interest is that you need to make sure you've got the last segment selected if you try to add more. If I was to click this and then add another station and place it here, what's going to happen when I start it up is that I should get an error somewhere, because if you notice before it went from here to here to here, now it's gone to here. So you may get an error saying unable to get to section such and such. In this case, it looked like it just changed the order, so it worked. But just be aware that it can be buggy if you start creating the sections in weird orders. In this case, I had this one selected and then made another, so it just changed the order that they went. So this became the last one. Other times you may get an error. It's just the way it is. So hopefully that makes a little sense. Out here is an example of the other boat. It's the same kind of thing. Here I just have an entrance, and I'll just kind of start it up to go fast. Here's an exit. This boat is going now. It's getting dark out, and there goes the boat. So that's really all there is to this type of transport ride, but it can be tricky if you don't know that relatively simple part. So hope that helps, and you start adding boat transports to your parks. Thanks. Enjoy.